Welcome back. What we're going to talk about now is you've got, you spent a lot of time at the beginning of the sustainment process getting all your software assets nicely identified and baseline. But unfortunately, the one thing that's a given in the software business is change. So the idea basically is that you've got to have some method of accommodating change. Now, the first step is going to help you a lot with the second step. Let's say somebody comes along and they say, this red thing here, we're going to have to add some more functionality. That functionality is going to represent this here. Now, what you're going to discover in a minute, first of all, I got to be able to do something here. First of all, obviously, the responsible thing to do when you talk about that functionality is this project here is going to be S2 baseline 1. Got to get it labeled. Always have to have it labeled. But what we're going to do is put this functionality down on top of this thing here. Now, the question is, what are we going to do about that? Well, essentially, what you have to do is take a look at this. Usually take a look at this in terms of what it leads to, and take a look at this in terms of what it produces. So you got all three of these things here. And basically, you don't do any of this in a vacuum, and this is the real advantage of it. You look at everything as a whole. And so if I say, I want to put this on top, well, what if putting this on top basically is going to create this sort of situation where you've got a hole over here that you didn't know about before, but you specified it that way, and your changes over here create more holes. Well, you don't want to do that. And so what you have to do is very carefully analyze the implications of adding this here in terms of what you get here. What you're very likely to get, which you'll certainly get, are additional design requirements. And along with that, that's going to produce a whole bunch of extra stuff. Now, this isn't the baseline yet. And the reason why it's not a baseline yet is because none of this is labeled. And so what you do basically is once you make the sort of decide how all this fits together, which is part of the analysis phase of sustainment, you go back in and you look at this and you say, all right, these are these are a bunch of new things. I get two new functions added right here. What does that mean in terms of security impacts? For instance, this one here is going to be single sign-on. Everybody wants single sign-on, get into your systems with a single password. That's a good thing, but the security problem that goes along with that is somebody loses a password, whoever got it now has total access to the entire system, not just whatever that person had that was, that they were authorized for. And so you got to think about whether that means anything or not. If it's something that's important to you, time's money and that sort of stuff, you put it down as a requirement. And you look at the design requirements that go along with that. And so this is nicely labeled. This is additional function, this is design function 2 for baseline 1, and that got added. And this is design function 3, and we haven't decided what this is, but this is single sign-on. And basically the implementation of that, of course, always it takes place separate, and so this part here is all done. This part here was already done. This part's got to get integrated. And so the other thing you have, if you do rigorous baseline management, is the ability to talk about how to effectively and efficiently integrate these things. The worst part about this is, see, when we added these here, we also pulled this one into the mix because the system basically relies on somehow on the sign-on for this one here, which means that this has been pulled in, this has been pulled in. These can sit over here because they really aren't pulled in. But basically, this here is now, at a minimum, I'll leave this out, just to be as loose as possible. So maybe the specification doesn't include anything. But you've got to consider the design issues when you're talking about something that's going to involve more than one system. And so this gets pulled in, this gets pulled in. And if it gets pulled in, there might be something that you do in the labeling process that's going to say, this is now a part of S2 on baseline 1. And this is also, it's a note. And so later on, if you got a problem on this baseline, you know that this system is also involved. And again, that's the advantage of a labeling process, which nobody does. And it's no concept of why they do that. But basically, if you're not doing it, the only thing you're doing right now in terms of managing your security of your systems is babysitting and hoping that nobody notices the stuff that you didn't notice. At any rate, okay, now we got these additional things here because basically we've got to add 2 new functions to the code, and this is brand new stuff. Now, the way you prevent spaghetti code is to make sure that, I'm going to call this program 2.1, and I'm going to call this program 3.1, and it's whatever is meaningful for you. I mean, these have got to have some intelligence to them, but the idea basically is, okay, now these have been added. Now, what these are, or have to be, is traceable from the specification to the design element that's creating the new code to the code itself. Now, all this is going to get inspected at the end of the sustainment process, and that's part of something that we're going to talk about later on. But the idea basically is that we also know that because this is here, it pulls this in. Because this is here, it pulls that in. And so if we're going to look at maintenance in these things here and any change, or even if there's any attack in someplace here, I've got to look here too because this is affected. Now, the reason why that's particularly good for me right now is because, like I said, you've got 100 million lines of code. How are you going to keep track of that? Well, you can keep track of your assets like this if they're properly labeled in a database. And so if you say, I got an attack on this new module here that I wrote based on this design as a part of this specification requirement, well, then I know that if there's an attack here, it's going to carry over to here. And one of the things that the hacker community counts on is the ability to cascade through a series of systems to get to the one they want. Perhaps this is the one they really were after. And this one here, because of something, gets pulled in over here. Well, as you know, this one here is insecure. And so the whole point basically would be to kind of come at this one through this point right here. And you wouldn't know any of that if you didn't have this properly labeled. So the important thing about change management is the ability to be able to consider what the impacts, first of all, analyze the impact of the change and make decisions about whether it's worthwhile doing at all. And then once that's done, to be able to represent the new changed product in a way that maintains the integrity of the baseline. And if you're able to do that, you're going to be able to keep track of all your assets in a way that's going to allow you to be able to, first of all, protect them better because simply you're going to know where your problems are. And second of all, to respond better because if you do have a problem in one, you're going to know what else is affected by any given attack. And so that's the advantage of the baseline management process in general, is that basically you're able to keep control and rationally manage your assets over time.